about some of the new machines. There you are, waiting for new hardware, and within not that many months, 3 machines come along together. All with different price ranges, all with different facilities. So we've got the RISC, which has been around for a year or more. We've got the IGEPV5, which has been around in finished form since March. And we've got the titanium, which has been around since November in finished form again from March. So when it got to the end of March, I thought, well, they're all working. So I wrote an article up for the Wakefield magazine, which got published in June, which was an impossible comparison between the machines, because I hadn't used any of them for long enough to be really sure, which ones were the bee's knees and which ones weren't. I'll have to confess, I'm still in a similar position, but what I can do is I can tell you some of the limitations with some of the machines. But I'll just start off by saying what I've got here today. First of all, there's a Raspberry Pi in a Visa mount case mounted behind the TV, which does a chiming clock. That's principally used as a TV. It's got a clock on the screen here. It's principally used as a TV in my bedroom with an antenna coming in, network connection to get the time right, and the Pi is just really there as a novelty. Although it's a TV, it can display 1920 by 1080, so all of these machines can talk to it quite happily. The other little feature it's got on it is an info feature, which means you can have a look at the signal that it's receiving, and there it said 1080p 60 Hz. So, or it might say 1920 by 1200 or whatever. So you can see exactly the difference it's receiving. Another handy factor on it. At the moment it's got 2 HDMI sockets. So in one of the sockets is plugged the Pi on the back, and in the other socket is plugged the titanium. So I'll move it on to the titanium. It just means switching to the other socket. Now the sound comes over the HDMI on the Raspberry Pi and on the RISC, but the other machines have got audio sockets, so you won't hear anything from the other machines because I haven't brought speakers along to plug into the back of them. So, but the Raspberry Pi transmits audio over HDMI, and so does the RISC. So that's one area where they're different. If you're really keen on audio, high quality audio, then the RISC is a good choice because you've got USB audio devices can plug in, and you've got audio over HDMI. So if you get a high quality hi-fi or a high quality monitor, you can hear the sound in full digital quality. So 192K, for example. This monitor doesn't do 192K, but the sound is quite reasonable on it. But I can't show you any sound from the titanium because I didn't bother to bring any speakers along. So, what does the titanium offer, as I'm showing you that? Well, this is a kit, so I bought just a circuit board and managed to get an empty computer case for nothing from a local computer shop, which had the front panel stuff, these bits here that I've adapted, a couple of switches and the sockets and things, and the leads for them. I could then plug straight into the circuit board, a drive, a CD drive, SSD drive, and this gubbins of flashing LEDs, which unfortunately I can't control because the battery in this control box seems to have gone. So at the moment they're on, you've got white LEDs lighting it up, but they flash in all sorts of funny colours, but I can't do anything with that because this thing is just not doing anything.
The reason it's there
is because the titanium board draws so little current on the 12-volt line that the power supply is liable to switch off. So it draws quite a bit on the 5-volt, but a lot of the computer power supplies look at the 12-volt line and say, oh, there's nothing there, so I'm not needed, and switch off. And then say, oh, there's a computer connected, you're not going to switch on again, which isn't terribly good for a computer. In fact, just having the box there without the LEDs lit is enough to provide a load. So I normally leave the LEDs off. But that was the reason I provided it, to provide a load. I've got a very efficient power supply. You can hear it's silent. I've got a very efficient power supply there, which is no fan, just passively cooled, so completely silent. As you hear. Now, there are some limitations, and the limitations are quite complicated. The titanium uses an internal colour format of what's called RGB, which is not what RISC OS normally expects. RISC OS normally expects BGR, and it's all to do with the order in which they're stored in memory. If you use all the operating system commands to display stuff on the screen, it's absolutely fine. But certain software like Artworks and Photodesk internally send stuff to the screen, and they need to be updated to work properly on these machines. Artworks has been, Photodesk is being. At the moment, Photodesk doesn't work on titanium and it doesn't work on RGB. It has been clutched to work on the ARMX6. The video on the titanium is limited to 2048 wide, which isn't a practical problem for most people. And it's got 2 video outputs on the titanium, so you can drive 2 monitors with half the desktop on each. There's software to do that. It doesn't have audio over HDMI, so you've got separate audio sockets on the back for all conventional loudspeakers. It can't do 256 colours. It'll do 16 colour modes, but not 256. So if you had a particular need for 256 colour, titanium won't do that. The other thing that titanium offers, which I don't know whether I can demonstrate, but I'll try, is it allows you to launch Linux from RISC OS, but not the other way around. So you can run an application that will start Linux, but to get back to RISC OS, you have to just reset. So that's quite handy, because it means it's effectively dual boot. You just boot up, it boots up in RISC OS. If you want Linux, you just click a RISC OS app and it'll take you into Linux. The titanium is a lovely circuit board designed with RISC OS in mind. It's a high-end machine, so it's expensive, and the only limitation I can think of, audio over HDMI, doesn't have that, doesn't have the biggest video, doesn't have 4K video, and won't do 256 colour screen mode. Right, let's move on to, well, I'll try it. I've got 2 SSD drives in there, one of which is removable, and somewhere. Proceed to leave RISC OS and load Linux. Yes. And that is just basic Linux. If you want the desktop, you just type in. Linux is one of these things where you, if you're connected to the internet, you just type, get whatever it is, and it just downloads it all and puts it on and runs it. So I've got the command line to type to start the desktop up, but I have to confess I haven't done it. So that's just a command line in. But if you type the right thing on the command line, it will download a completely graphic Linux desktop, with browsers and everything else and running it. So I just haven't bothered to do it because you can only do so much.
So it's similar to the old
So it now can start.
Linux version that was with the original Linux that stopped working a while back.
Well, it's just like loading Linux on the Pi. You just drop it into the desktop. If you want to go into drop into the command line. If you want to go into the desktop, you have to type the commands.
Okay.
So I haven't downloaded it though, so there is no desktop there.
It's in there, right?
So I can't do it because it's not connected. So that was really just to illustrate that it will let you go into. Imul runs perfectly happily, and so does Impression. Artworks runs, of course. That's been corrected to handle BGR correctly. And Photodesk doesn't work, which is being worked on. It won't start up. Being worked on. Well, well, it's not really being developed very much, has it?
Yeah.
There's been no updates for years. But it's a very nice, fast machine. What I have brought with me today is a sort of just a little comparison. So I've got about half a dozen of those, so you can take them away. It looks pretty boring now that it's running Linux, so I'll move over to another machine. So if I press the reset button on the front.
That'll go and survive to the end of this talk.
Which is that one. That's the reset button. It'll start beginning RISC OS.
Just a question, Chris. So I assume before you start up the Linux desktop, you close down all your RISC OS.
Oh, well, what it does, when you go into that application, Go Linux, it says, do you want to do this? And if you say yes, it basically restarts the machine but booting into Linux. So RISC OS is just as if you've shut down.
Yeah, if you've got some.
Oh, you're not going to get back to it?
No, but if you've got some program running or you've got you're doing some word processing or whatever, then I assume you save everything before you boot in.
Yes, you have to, because you can't get back to it. It would all be lost, yes. Yeah. That's why I asked you to confirm. It's not playing.
I assume from the 256 point of view, colours, I assume that if you could get some of the games to work, then most of them into 256 colours, aren't they? So I don't know whether John Abbott's.
Well, it won't do 256 colours, but it will do 16 colours.
Yeah.
I don't know, because I don't know games very much, I don't know what Imul lets you do under those circumstances.
Yeah.
But has it started up? Yes, it has. I can shut it down, and you'll see that it's got an auto power switch, so that when I shut it down, it will say turning off in 5 seconds. So it'll turn itself off, and I'll show you the IGEP. Titanium has DVID. Yes.
DVID.
Right, I've connected the.
What happens if you put a DVI to HDMI lead?
Well, that's what I'm having to use to connect the titanium to the monitor.
Yeah.
So I'm using a DVID to HDMI lead, and it's absolutely fine.
It will work.
It works.
I thought Sprout was saying that they had plugs to. You've got 2 ports out, haven't you?
You have got 2 ports, and there is software that will use the second one now.
Yeah.
But I don't.
I say he was saying that he would be able to use audio over HDMI.
One of them you can use audio over HDMI, but it's not yet implemented. As I
That's
understand.
probably a future.
Because
from what you're saying then, Rob. So
only one of them is capable of taking audio over HDMI, and it's the other one to the one that RISC OS currently uses. It is possible to tell RISC OS to use the other one, and Andrew's looking at doing that, to offer HDMI and audio, but I don't think that's currently been pursued. So the IGEP takes a little bit longer to start up. Takes about 35 seconds, the IGEP, the other two take about 15 seconds. There'll be a little bit of a delay on the way up because there's no network, but because it's a static address, it gets up pretty quickly. I think, yes, there we are, that's the screen display. I think that's in 1920 by 1200. So if I have a look at info, 1920 by 1200 at 60 Hz, but the monitor itself is only 1080, so it's slightly scaled at the moment. I normally use it with 1200, you see. The IGP is effectively what would have been something like the Panda Ball 5, but it's a slightly different class of processor. It uses RGB again, so artworks and NetSurf have been fixed, Photodesk and Ovation haven't. It's again limited to 2048 video width, but it's only got one output, so you can't fiddle it with two monitors. Doesn't have audio over HDMI. It can't do either 16 or 256 colours. The minimum is 496. So that might not work terribly well for games, I don't know. It's got the fastest SATA interface, but it's, you know, less than a factor of 2 faster than the titanium, which is less than a factor of about 1.5 faster than the RX6. You can buy it as a kit again from CJE, a little bit cheaper. It does run iMullor, no problem. Won't run Photodesk, but then that's simply because they haven't.
It's a bit of a problem, seeing as CJ owns.
Yeah, that's the first restrict test.
You could well say that. I'm afraid it's not being very actively developed. They're working on it, but they've been working on it for quite a time. I only believe in software that actually works now, rather than software that might work in the future. So they might well fix it, but at the moment it doesn't. It's an intermediate price between ARM-X6 and titanium. So it's one of those things where you've got to decide exactly what functions it is you need and which machine satisfies them. If the ARM-X6 satisfies all of your needs, then that's the cheapest of the three, so that makes a great deal of sense. If you have a particular need for speed and you want something twice as fast, then you're forced to the choice of the IGEP or the titanium, and then the detailed differences between the two will probably decide what you go for.
Will the RX6 run Photodesk?
Yes, it will. Yes, because what it does is, as Photodesk is, there's a utility which rewrites the run file for Photodesk, starts up part of it with the cache off until it's got over the bit where it would otherwise fail, and then it turns the cache back on and starts the rest of it up, and it runs from then on quite happily. So you can't do that on the other two, I think, because you can't turn the cache off on the other two. So that solution isn't one you can use. So that, for me, that's important because I use Photodesk.
I use it a lot.
Yes. So that gives you the SATA interface, as I say, is the fastest. Both the titanium and the IGEP have a purpose-built SATA interface using ADFS, which is slightly faster than the ARM-X6, which sits on top of the SCSI filing system that runs the USB type mass storage devices. So they're using the SATA in different ways, but to the user it just means the file name looks slightly different. It starts off ADFS on the two, on the ARM-X6 it starts off SCSI, but that doesn't really make any difference. let me then move on to the RX6. So I'll shut down the, and again this has got, I can also power down, so that if I shut it down, well there it is. That's one of the problems with a big screen, you have to keep looking around for the mouse. Should now turn itself off.
Can you run the screens at a bigger resolution?
Bigger than?
But no, I don't mean, I mean in a smaller resolution.
Oh yes.
720 by...
Yeah. I'll show you. Yes, that's no. So the RX6, unlike the other two, reads the EDID and automatically charges the screen icon on the desktop with those modes, rather than you selecting a mode file. You don't have to have it do that, but it does that by default. So what you'll see on the screen on the desktop is that it will have read the EDID and it will know the different modes the monitor can cope with. Now it does occasionally do this, get as far as service post init and then freeze, but the solution is rather simple, and it only does it occasionally from cold, but they all do it.
I'm doing it on my arm really.
Yeah. But,
It's
and it will sit there for a little while because I think this has got a dynamic DHCP address. It won't find it, so it will sit there for 40 seconds, scratching itself.
25 seconds.
So what version?
About 40 seconds.
What version of RISC OS you got on that?
523.
They're all 5.23.
But the old
They're all the latest I can get my hands on.
Yeah.
So I put OS 4, is it, for the RX6? And it's 29th of June is the latest update for RISC OS on the RX6. Which is, if I look at the monitor, it will tell me that there's quite a range there. 640 plus 480, 720 plus 400, 720, 480, 725, 76, 800 plus 600, 1024 plus 768, 1152 by 86, well there's about another 3 or 4 up to the total, the maximum, which is 1920 by 1080. It's read that from a monitor on startup, and that's all of the modes the monitor will accept, so it's offering all of those. If I'll just demonstrate using an application I know. The sound is all coming over digitally through the HDMI connection. That's my application, Signal Various Training Service, and then just go on with the sounds ring. But it shows you that the sound is quite reasonable. That's silent now, isn't it? But it's, yeah, quite reasonable sound quality. On my 3440 by 1440 TV at home, the sound is absolutely spot on, because that's a high-end monitor for the RX6, so it's got very good speakers on it. So the RX6, a little bit slower, but not so slow as to be particularly noticeable. It does not do 16 colour, but it does do 256 colour screen modes. These are because of the way the hardware is arranged. It's a complicated picture, but because it's colour swapped RGB, there was a way around it on the Ionics, but later versions of the Ionics couldn't do one of those, 16 or 256, I can't remember which, but earlier versions could. It's all down to the detail about whether they could swap the bits over in software or not. The audio quality is very high. Photodesk works quite happily. It does very high 4K video, very good. In fact, you don't want to go too far down that road, otherwise the writing becomes so small you can't read it. So if you tried to put, I don't know, 2,500 by 1,600 or something on that screen size, everything would be that much smaller. You would find it difficult to read. So there's an optimum position on how far you go down that line, depending on how big a monitor you've got.
Am I right in remembering, and you made a special theme for kind of these stupidly high resolutions so you can actually see things? Did I read it on News Scoops?
Sorry?
I'm sure that you made a slightly a theme which was so on 4K resolution.
You can tell RISC OS this is 1920 by 1080, but I want you to display 960 by 540. That's all built, they've always been able to do that on RISC OS. And the monitor will scale it to the higher resolution. You can do it in such a way where all the bits are actually used, so it's crisp, very, very crisp, but bigger. That's relatively easy to do. Yeah, it's just called the eigenvalues, I think. So you just tweak the mode to do that. I find it just as easy to go down to something like 1024 by 768 or the widescreen equivalent, and suddenly you can see everything a bit better. So, whereas for this application it suits me to have a high screen resolution, if I actually just chop it down to 80 by 720, obviously everything's that much bigger. It's roughly the same screen sort of proportion. For something like doing a bit of word processing, let's get rid of this for a minute. For something like doing a bit of word processing, this is obviously going to be much more useful. I don't know what I've got on here actually. I've got a strong end, I've got Zap, I think I've got any text files. Yeah, there we go. Obviously, that's much more readable at the lower resolution. Screen edit, which I hardly ever use. The only other computer I've got, which is more novelty, is the Raspberry Pi Zero running on a battery, which it's been doing since the start of the meeting, with a touch screen, 800 by 480 touch screen, which is just a novelty really, but that's entirely standalone, there's no power connected to it, it's just running from a battery. It's one of those batteries designed for charging mobile phones, 5-volt battery. So, what have they got in common? They've all got SATA storage, the 3. All got a good fast processor, they've all got a micro SD card, they've all got gigabit Ethernet, although that's held back by the RISC OS network stack. SATA connector, the Titanium's got 4 SATA connectors. Real-time clock, serial port, USB sockets. At least 2 gigabytes of memory. The IGP has 4, but RISC OS can only use just a bit more than 2. So how do you choose between them? Well, there are several things where one of them is quite different. Audio over HDMI is one. Widescreen 4K video is another. Speed, if you want tip-top speed, then again you're looking at the Titanium or the IGP. And it's very much a look at the detail of what video you want and what speed you want and what is enough to satisfy your needs. The RMX6 is slower, but it's actually quite usable. So the speed isn't noticeably a problem. And it's much faster than the Ionics. All of them are much faster than the Ionics. I have got a little benchmark table on the back which gives you the cold boot time, a countdown calculation time, which is a countdown numbers game, time to unpack a ROM, time to compile a ROM, and how fast it is at rendering the Artworks Apple. RX6 is a little more compatible than the other two because it's a Cortex A9. The other two are Cortex A15, which introduces certain issues of, it's an ARM, if I've got this right, an ARM version 8. I've got to check these things because the ARM version numbers are a right nightmare. I think it's an ARM V8. I'll find it in here now. I think the ARM X6 is an ARM V7, and I think the other two are ARM V8. Some software has been compiled using, C compiler, where one of the instructions it frequently uses is an SWP instruction, which is not supported on the version 8. So they have to be recompiled. It's not a problem. And it's not ones that link to the library, it's ones that have been compiled using the library that are the problem. So NetSurf has been sorted out. They can all be sorted out if there's still active development. I think the wise thing to do is to say, is this still something that works? Identify the one or two bits of software you use. Both the Titanium and the IGEP offer low vector ROMs, which is required for IMULA to run. If you use high vector ROMs, IMULA won't run. So they're both using low vector ROMs, all three of them are at the moment, because I want to run IMULA on them. That IMULA hasn't been rewritten yet to run on high vector ROMs, but that's not a problem for any of those machines, because the low vector ROMs are quite possible. It might not be brilliant when you want to use a second core, because the whole purpose of using high vectors was to make sure everything's prepared so that when we do want to use the second core, the zero page doesn't get in the way. They're both considerably faster, well, not sort of factor of 3 or 4 faster than the Raspberry Pi. Factor of 3 faster, let's say, than the Raspberry Pi. So, significantly faster than the Raspberry Pi and much better storage options. Significantly faster than the Ionics and much better storage options. And vastly faster than the RISC PC and better storage options. So, if you're thinking of replacing your RISC PC, then I think that's a very wise thing to do, because they will not go on forever. And it will get more and more tricky as they fail to work out how to get the data off them. But, so I think it's worth replacing the RISC PC, and it's worth considering replacing the Ionics, because the Ionics power supply does fail eventually. That leaves you in a position of having to spend 50 or 60 quid on a new power supply just to actually get the stuff off it.
I'm regretting that. I bet the RISC PC will outlast any of these machines.
If you change the battery on the circuit board, because the battery on the circuit board corrodes, and after about 15 years, 20 years, it writes off the whole motherboard. But it's a cheap battery, so if you just cut it off and change it, yes, I agree with you.
Right, they've done 20 years already, and it's been used 4 or 5 hours every day.
You need to change the battery, definitely, if you haven't done it. Definitely need to, because...
I just bought a nickel highlight from Napkins and sold it.
Yeah, but you've got to do it because if you don't, they're very cheap. You can get them. You can get them. Well, you can get them from CJE Micros, but you can also get them cheaply. They're very cheap if you just know the part number and what.
I'll do that.
How does it destroy the entire motherboard?
Well, what it does is it starts
Eats
corroding
away the...
because it's flat on the circuit board.
Yeah.
And it starts corroding, and the corrosion then eats into the circuit board. It's a multi-layer circuit board, and you don't really get any symptoms until it's too late, and then your circuit board's written off, because there's a lot of signals that go underneath it that you just can't do anything with. So it's definitely worth replacing.
Okay.
You know, it really is quite straightforward to replace. I've done it. The thing that's awkward is taking the motherboard out of the ionics, out of the RISC PCs.
We could have another stupid hardware meeting, couldn't we, next year?
Well, about a year after I changed my battery, it kept losing the date. It would go wrong about once a month, and it gradually got more frequent until I was having to redo the date every year, every day.
And I think that's a symptom of problems with the power supply.
Well, no, it was. I think it must have been from that, because I took out the motherboard and I checked that the battery actually connected to what it was supposed to connect to, and the negative of the battery was supposed to be 140 ohms to earth, and it was about 2.5k. So I sorted in a 120 ohm resistor in, and it's been perfect ever since.
Oh, right. Yeah. Well, the symptoms you get are worth listening to. If you do get symptoms, there are some symptoms that are very characteristic of a failing power supply. I can't remember which bit of it on the ionics is very sensitive to voltage, but you start to notice it, and if you do notice it, it means your power supply is going to die. So it's worth getting the stuff off onto other forms of storage and looking at replacing it. Otherwise, you'll just be buying another power supply. And
This is a RISC PC, so.
yeah, RISC PC, the battery is the biggest hurdle.
That's right, I did that.
Yeah. This is just a Pi Zero, and I brought it along more as a novelty than anything. So there are 6 computers here, 3 of which are the RX6, the IGEP, and the titanium are what I would call the modern versions on which RISC OS runs. The Harmony and the Harmony X, or the Panda board and the Beagle board, are effectively obsolete as a new computer. They'll still keep running quite happily, but these are all significantly better than them.
I've never heard of an IGP. Where did it come from?
Well, the IGEP V5 comes from the same stable as the IGEP V2. Now, that's not answering your question, but that's all I know. Why it's called IGEP, I'm not sure. The IGEP V5 is the development that was going on in parallel with the Panda board 5. It's the OMAP 5. So whereas the Beagle board was OMAP 3, the Panda board was OMAP 4. The Panda board 5 was going to be OMAP 5, but they abandoned it. And the IGEP V5 is an OMAP 5 equivalent type of development, but it's actually using a different family called Citara. They developed each of the Panda board, Beagle board, and the IGEP are effectively development boards so that you can design and prove a design and then use the open license design to actually make your stuff exactly the format you want it. So the development boards are really for the developers to develop with, but they're just a very handy platform for RISC OS.
Who sells all these then?
Right, the IGEP V5 was developed by a company called ISS, and CJE act as a reseller for that, and they will sell you a bare board with a licensed RISC OS so that you've got a kit, or they'll sell you it in a computer case as the Rapido IG. The RX6 was developed for the automobile industry, and Andrew Archon was a reseller for that, and he'll sell you either a kit with a licensed RISC OS titanium board was designed by Rob Sproson of RISC OS fame, and is using the same chip that will eventually appear in a BeagleBoard X15 development board, but the titanium is a full-size motherboard with a lot of extra sockets on it, and not actually done down to be the tiniest possible size. So it's designed as a desktop computer. You can buy it from LSR as a circuit board, build your own case, which is what I've done, or both CJE and RComp act as resellers for that, and both of them package it in a case as a finished product. But you can buy it directly from LSR as effectively a kit where you've got to add the drive and the power supply and everything yourself.
Yeah.
Prices are all given in this nifty little handout. Reasonably up to date, I think I did check them. And you've got a benchmark table on the back. And in between, the 6 pages in between, are the article published in WROC magazine, June 2016, and on my website as well as an impossible comparison. So you've got a lot of detail about the development of the various boards and what they can and can't do, CDs and DVDs, how good they are at burning CDs, DVDs, that sort of thing. It's all rather complicated.
And have you got handouts?
Yeah, I've got half a dozen of them. And
Is that on your website as well?
no. What's on my website is the 6 pages in the middle. The front page and the back page diagram are ones I did for today. So I can do you a PDF of the front and back page and let you have a copy of that. Or you can take away one of these 5 handouts that I've got. And I'll open it up for questions.
So you talk about core. So how many cores have each machine got?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well done. They've all got, let me think, the ARM-X6 has definitely got a second core. I think they've all got a second core, and it's possible one of them might have 4 cores, and I can't remember.
RISC 6.
Right. One of them's got 4 cores. I think that's the ARM-X6. Yeah. They're no good to RISC OS at the moment, because we haven't developed RISC OS to be a software that can be multi-threading and use another core. So they're academic for us, really. I mean, the Raspberry Pi 3 has got 4 cores. But RISC OS still only uses 1 core.
So what software requires these very high speeds?
That's a good question. I mean, there are some things I do that just take forever.
Change FSIs on their own.
Yeah, there are some things that take about 10 seconds that are so much nicer if they take about 3 seconds. But I wouldn't have said that was worth spending money on. But there are some things that take half an hour that can be done in 10 minutes that are useful. But you've really got to have a pretty intensive task. And you don't have to do that sort of thing very often. So it's still a practical solution. Is to say, well, I'll do that before I go to bed, and when I wake up in the morning, I'll have calculated it, and it doesn't matter how long it takes.
I disagree there. One of the biggest advantages of having a faster machine is backup.
Backup is faster, yes. I mean,
Backup is important. Backup. You've got an iMix, you should have all your hard drive backed up on there. All of it.
it is conspicuously faster for backup. I mean, on the titanium machine I've got there, I've got 2 SSD drives. One of them I can just unplug, because I've put it in a little sort of housing with a plug at the back. So if I just unplug it, it's a little bit of a strain, because I just unplug it, and it just pushes back in and plugs in. So, you know, you can change the drive and use one as a backup drive and put it away somewhere. Whether that's secure enough or not is another matter, but
I guess if you're using email as well, because you've got the disk access, then if you've got
very
large
sensitive
amounts
to backup,
yeah.
because
Well, not just the backup, I suppose it's quicker because it'll be batch.
oh, it's very much quicker. I mean, I do my email on the RMX6 and noticeably quick. Because I haven't deleted any emails since I started using emails, so they're all there. So it's sort of indexes them reasonably quickly. Whereas it used to take about half a minute or more longer on the Ionics. So having the SSD drive is a very much faster, practical drive. Very noticeably better on speed. But I wouldn't have said the difference between the RMX6 and the other two is enough to actually worry about. It is faster on the titanium, it is faster on the IGP, but it's only faster by a factor of somewhere between 1.5 and 2, depending what you're doing.
Do you use RISC OS much?
Yes, I've got it on the machines, yeah.
That's annoyingly slow.
That is extremely good and
Sorry.
fast on the titanium. Yes, it's very good. I like it. Demonstrate that if you want.
Yeah, that's worth a go.
Yeah, I'll do that.
Well, we can take one of those.
West Midlands.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you make the map a larger scale map, it takes considerably longer. As you expect, because it's got to. But if you cover a larger area, it's more complexity. If you zoom in, it's a smaller scale. So that's a smaller scale, yes. But if you do it at large, sensible large scale, it's very, very quick.
Yeah.
But this is asking it to do quite a huge area around Birmingham.
Yeah.
So
A lot quicker than the army.
you'll see it is significantly quicker than the Armini for this particular application. So you can see it zoomed in there very quick. I've got a special style sheet that I've written in there that shows railways in red. I'm not sure I've got it loaded at the moment, but let me just see, what is it? Map style. It's railways. Let's do a different map style. You'll see this, railways are pink in that one. I've written a couple of styles that show railways differently because I actually use the map. So I went right the way through every railway feature and changed the colour to suit what colour I wanted.
Done the same with footpaths, I'm making twice as wide.
It's very handy because you can't do that on a PC, but you can on this because typically with RISC OS software it's extremely configurable. So
Footpaths.
yes, so it's very fast. So if I look at Zurich, you see it's taking rather a long time to find the data on Switzerland. Not quite sure why.
Probably all the
Unless
countries.
it's still at home. It's at 1 to a million. So that is going to take it a long time. Let's support that because that will take forever. So it's done. Right. And that's Zurich, more sensible scale, but rather quick, rather more quickly. Very handy. Any more questions?
All these systems will cope with interpreting basic standard RISC OS fashion.
Absolutely, yeah. No problem with that, because that's been the case all the way through. If you've written an application in BASIC, yes, they're all fine. It's pretty much, if you use all the standard operating system calls, it will work for almost anything, so not just BASIC. All these new colours, the operating system handles all these new colours perfectly okay. It's just applications that do their own screen handling and write direct to the screen will go wrong. Well, that's things like Photodesk, but not the sort of program that you or I would write. So, you know, you've got a good choice of machines and a reasonable difference in price and performance. It's very much you pay your money and you take your choice. Andrew's very helpful at the shows, and so is Chris. There's plenty of theatre presentations showing you the machines. You know, there's a lot of information out there, and there's the Raw Forum will answer any specific questions about, you know, can it do this or can it do that? It's an ideal time to look at upgrading.
Have you seen the dual screen working with RISC OS?
It was working at the last show, I believe.
Yes.
I didn't go and look at it, but it was working at the last show.
Side by side.
What it does is it basically shows you half, perhaps slightly more than half, I can't remember the desktop on one, and like left hand and right hand halves. So effectively it allows you a double width desktop. So it'll let you have a, like, instead of 1920 by 1080, it'll let you have 3800 or something by 1080. And when you open a window, it will position the window so it doesn't straddle the screen.
Okay.
So that you don't sort of think, well, it's cut in half. That had been thought about. And the mouse will just go from one screen to the
Okay,
other.
it won't do 2160, this is what I'm interested in. I think 1980 is wide enough, but 1020. Sorry,
No, they haven't gone that way, they've gone the other way. They've gone left and right.
It's not so interesting. Because the A4 sheets of paper off the bottom of the 1080.
Well, there are monitors you can turn through 90 degrees.
Right.
They exist already, they've got a hinge on them, and you have to get the computer to sort of turn around to 1080 by 1920. So some of the computers can do that, I don't know which ones. Some of them probably will be able to handle that. If you actually said you want the monitor on its side, some of them can handle that. PCs can handle that.
Yes, but my Linux can't.
The Linux certainly can't. I don't know the status of that. But if you've got a particular application you want to get that vertical format, you can get monitors that will turn around. But you have to tell.
I've got a 1980 1200.
Yeah.
If I do turn around,
Yeah.
and then you've got to look sideways to use the mouse.
Yeah, but you've got to. It is feasible to do that if the circuit board is still done on the graphics card. It's not done by the computer.
Right.
So on a PC, you just have a high-end graphics card and you can do anything like that. On RISC OS, it's a bit more problematical. So that would be something to take up. You'd have to ask specifically about that because that's a relatively uncommon need.
If I'm going sideways, I interfere with my wife's part of the desk. You see, we're going vertically. There's no one up there.
No, not straight, there's a standing on it.
Yes, so I can, yeah.
Yeah,
It's not the one on the other. But
yeah, not just one monitor on top of the
Yes,
other.
you go.
But his desk is going like that.
Yes.
He actually told us that it's British.
If you ask about that, I don't think anyone will do stacking because that's more easily accommodated just by turning the monitor. So I think
Don't get two monitors and turn them both. But then then you get stop going left to right, I think. But not working at the moment.
I think you're asking a difficult question. Because I don't think...
the answer, is it?
I don't mean difficult to answer. I mean, I think you're asking for something that's difficult to do.
Okay.
So you need to take that up and see whether anyone's done it. But I don't think they've done it commercially. So I don't think there'd be much need out there. I mean, I did turn mine on the PC and virtual RISC PC. I did turn the screen around 90 degrees and have it in a vertical format. And I found there were so many niggly little things that wouldn't quite work on it that I found it quite irritating, and I went back to the normal format.
I certainly leave mine permanently in A4 in portrait because it's not wide enough. But the thing is, it is wide enough, but it's not deep enough.
Yeah.
Ever since we went to 1080, 1050, 1920, 1080, it's just not deep enough.
It's worth talking to Andrew Rawnsley about that because his widescreen, very widescreen monitor, the 3840 one, does a 1200 depth, I think.
1440.
And I think he said it shows that it's quite good for showing A4 documents side by side.
Yeah, I've got a 12.
Oh yes, that is good. I've got 3440 by 1440.
Right.
And 1440 is enough to show A4.
Yeah, I agree. 1200 is just not quite enough.
Yeah, but you can. It is expensive. It's a very big monitor. It's about that wide.
Right.
Curved screen. Fairly expensive, but it will give 1440 height and 3440 wide.
Right.
And it's an excellent monitor. It's just a bit big, you know. But it works quite well. But the only one of those that can do that is the RISC OS. Right. Well, you feel free to apply.
Just one last question, nothing to do with this. It is to do with Elizalde. It's just produced some valve software. Do anything about it?
Yep. Get away with that, did I? Yes, I do.
Tell me that.
That's the flyer for it.
Right.
What it allows you to do on RISC OS, as you've already been able to do on other machines, is have your files stored on the cloud and be able to access them as a filing system from RISC OS. All you were able to do before with RISC OS would have been to use FTP, and cloud solutions don't tend to allow you FTP access for reasons which I'm quite sure I understand. And you can do it, it works. I mean, I did some testing for ROM before it was released, and it does work reasonably well.
Right.
Fairly fast. The filing system does put a bit of overhead into it, but not horrendous. It all depends on the speed of your internet connection as to how fast you can load and save. But it does what it says on the tin. You can have 10 gigabytes of free storage for a period undefined, notionally forever. But of course that won't be.
There's been some comments on the net now.
Yes.
Well, their business model will make them charge for it eventually.
Yeah.
But it's a secure connection. In other words, what you transmit up line is secured, and it's password secured on the server, but it's not encrypted. So it allows you to put your stuff on the server and access it from any device. One of these wonderful new mobile phone things, or PC or whatever.
Okay.
As well as RISC.
So it's basically like Dropbox, but it works on this one.
Yeah, but it's yours, yes.
Yeah.
So you can't then share it with someone because it's entirely yours.
Okay.
You couldn't share it with someone because you have to give them your password and they'd be able to save their files on it. So you can put it up there, it's effectively backup storage. You put your photos up there and they're stored in backup until they write to you and say we've been taken over by someone else and want to put prices up or whatever. But all of them have the same issue there. They're all the same.
Yeah.
But yes, that's a very neat little bit of software for RISC OS. It's on the titanium, but because it's not network connected, it obviously won't do anything. It works as a protocol just like LANman 98 and LANman workers protocols, and cloud is a protocol as well.
Okay.
So, and a filing system. Very easy to use, very good, yes. So, I've got one copy of that with me, so someone can have that if they're interested. But you can download them from NSR's site as well.
Yeah, so I could use that on my networked RISC OS PCs at home. You could all use that.
Relatively inexpensive.
Who are they?
LSR, which is a play of words on logical shift right, hence the greater than signs, is basically a company owned by Rob Sproson, who's a RISC OS Open. It's not actually a member of RISC OS Open, but he is associated with them, I think that's right. Or perhaps he is a member, but he doesn't always speak as a member of the board. Can't remember the detail. But he's designed a circuit board, and it's a lovely job he's made of that. Beaten the beagle board people to it by about a year. And he's now produced CloudFS. So really it just does what it says
I
on
could
the tin.
get rid of my NAS box and use this instead at home.
That is what they're hoping you'll do, so that when they do put the prices up,
That's fine. I'm dead by the moment.
yeah, it's a handy way for people to stash their photos online, and
I think it's a good way of sharing stuff across one
but
machine.
there are other ways of doing it. You've got Flickr and things like that, so there are other
Yeah,
alternatives.
Flickr doesn't really work very well on this stuff.
Well, it doesn't work for RISC OS, no.
No, well, I've got 4 RISC OS machines at home on the desk, all linked, and sharing stuff is normally done by RAMs and things and shared files. They're not going to have the machines on and using around this. If this is always up there in the cloud, the stuff's up there, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, must be a connection goes on.
If the connection goes, turn the machines off and go and play in the garden.
So, one of the things I've got with me is the articles I've published on the various first impressions of each of the machines and the comparison. I've only got one copy of each of those. You look at them and I'll rather take it away. But I've got about 5 or 6 of this comparison impossible handout, which you're welcome to take away. Right.
Thank you very much.
That's all right. You're welcome.